You are listening to the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast. Today we are joined by Mike Reilly, owner of Reilly Properties, and Lindsey Reilly, the principal of Reilly Properties. Mike and Lindsey take this episode to talk about how to identify habits of a qualified property manager, why there are so many bad property managers in Cleveland, and what makes Reilly Properties stand out as a property manager in Cleveland. Check it out.
All right, well, today's episode is about property managing. How to find a property manager. What to expect from a property manager. So let's start out with, what do you want when you say property manager? Basically, the number one want is, I don't want any hassles. I don't want any problems. I'm out of town. I just want somebody to take care of the house. And the rent check comes every month like clockwork. If there's any repairs that need to be done, then the property manager will contact me, we'll get an estimate, and we'll proceed from there. The house is maintained, the house is watched over. That's what I want the property manager to do. Now with me here is Lindsey Reilly, who runs the Reilly Properties division. Lindsey, why don't you add your 2 cents?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think as I was listening to you set up that introduction, one thing that I would have also included is how to find a qualified property manager. Because you can go on Google and search for property managers, and you can see different things come up on Craigslist. You can see things come up on Zillow. But it's really taking that time and talking to people who actually know what they're doing too. And, you know, what makes us more qualified than these other quote-unquote property managers is that, you know, when you're dealing not just with Reilly Properties, but with Reilly Painting and Contracting, you're getting that full service of contractors, electricians, plumbers, roofers, all under one roof, versus other property managers who have to sub that work out and have to take a couple of days to find someone who's available. So that makes us a lot different than other property managers, at least the ones that I've seen here in Cleveland, including my own, who is not Reilly Properties, but is a regular Cleveland property owner and will take sometimes days to get back to me to fix something that could have been done within that same day. So that was one thing I wanted to add with this as well.
Without this podcast becoming an infomercial for Reilly Properties, let's just talk as if the 7 listeners out there are friends of ours, and we're giving them the overview of what the property management business in Cleveland is like. And the first thing I want to start out with is that there are not a whole lot of good property management companies that I know of in Cleveland. And the reason is that the rental market in Cleveland is a fairly new phenomenon. There's always been apartments and duplexes, in the last 50, 60, 70 years when Cleveland became a modern city. But it's only been in the last 8 or 9 years where you've seen this huge influx of properties that are now being rented. And the reason for that is you have a huge number of those rentals where you have what I call reluctant landlords. These people don't want to be landlords in the first place. Keep that in mind. They lived in their house maybe for 5-10 years, and then all of a sudden the bottom fell out in the market in 2008. And now they are sitting on a house which is probably $20,000, $30,000 underwater. And then they have to relocate to another job because when the Great Recession came, not only did housing get affected, but so did a lot of people lost their jobs. So here's our reluctant landlord now, who's now living in Pittsburgh or Montana or who knows where, barely making ends meet with their house. They need that $1,000, $1,200 every month just to cover the mortgage, which does not leave a lot of room for capital repairs.
Agreed. Yep.
And
That's right.
so for people that are looking for a property manager, you have to keep in mind that there are a lot of property managers who literally just became property managers in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and property managers not by their own willingness or wanting to really do it, but because they almost have to do it.
Well, but let's back up. Let's unpack that a little, because let's talk about, again, the reason why these reluctant landlords are in the business. They have acted as their own property manager because they couldn't afford a property manager.
Right.
They're not like an outside investor coming in from California, buying some property. Now I want to go find a property manager. They've been acting as their own property manager, and which means that they're calling the handyman. They're collecting the check. They're trying to find somebody to rent the house, and they're all doing this remotely. So you've got this whole huge swath of rental homes which are manned by reluctant landlords. Then you have investors coming in from outside of Cleveland are looking to buy property, and they're looking for a property management company. Now, here's where the quality really suffers, and the reason why. There is no competition for property managers. Anybody can be a property manager. And as a result, you could hook yourself up with somebody who really has only been in the business for 2 or 3 years. Now, these property managers are all about collecting a fee. They don't really care who they get in the house. That's not their responsibility. They're managing the property. But the irony of it is, the single biggest concern that you should have when you're investing is who is going to be living in your house and who is going to do the vetting. Now let me pause on that. I want everybody to think about who's doing the vetting, who is selecting who's going to be living in your house. It is not the property manager. That's the irony. The property manager is there just to be the liaison between all the different trades who work on the house and collect the check. Now, they may be reluctant, or they may know somebody, and he may throw a Craigslist ad out to get somebody in there, but this is when the trouble really begins. You may get somebody in there who basically starts missing payments, who starts destroying the property, who starts having the police come over, because now you get some tenant in there whose boyfriend or girlfriend is getting kicked out. Now the neighborhood is in an uproar. And there's nobody really minding the store because property managers don't see that as their job. Now we, as Lindsey was saying earlier, what we've done is combine all the elements from getting the tenant to taking care of the repairs, and then to ride herd on the tenant to make sure that they comply with basic 101s of living in a property. Yeah. Lindsey, tell me a few stories of what you've been running through.
Well, I think fortunately over these last few years with vetting tenants is that when we're meeting, how do I say this? When I'm meeting with a potential new tenant, as I did say a couple of days ago, who ultimately submitted an application, which was a good sign, I'm definitely doing what I would say Mike Reilly would call like the smell test. I'm observing their behavior. I'm asking them questions about, well, obviously what's brought you to Cleveland? What's the reason for the move? Is there anything we need to know about right now before we start moving forward with this rental process? And, of course I'm being cordial about it. I'm not, putting the spotlight underneath them, but I do want to get a sense as to how serious they are about this, because, history has shown with our properties, these rental properties really do fly off the market, and so I'm not in the position of wanting to waste their time, let alone my time. So when I'm meeting with someone new who's looking to rent one of our properties, be it a managed property, which can sometimes be on a long-term basis or even a short-term basis, or even one of our properties, I'm really gauging with how serious they are. And, when I have a conversation with them about moving forward, they understand that, hey, once you're putting that money down, we're starting that process about, getting you into the home. And I think, it's a relationship that we want to develop with the tenant where they're not, scared of us about, calling their property manager. But, we're going to take care of them if they're taking care of the home and they're paying that rent on time. That's the bottom line for us, is taking care of the home that they're in and paying that rent on time. And we have developed a very good relationship with the cities where our properties are located, whereby if we're hearing about things that are going on in the neighborhood, be it, maybe a piece of crime or something, we're on top of that and we're checking in with the city to see what's going on. So it's a relationship that we're developing with the tenant. They take care of the home, they're paying that rent on time, they're being good tenants, and we in turn are providing them the service that they're expecting.
Okay, let me throw one important thing in. To those of you who are listening, curious about hiring us as a property manager. We talked about the importance of vetting the tenant, but equally important is vetting the client. And this is where we're not looking for more business. We're looking for the right kind of business to build a long-term relationship with. So here's what we look for in a potential client. One is we better have a good house to show. I'm not talking about, 5-bedroom mansion with a swimming pool in the backyard. I'm talking about a basic 3 to 4 bedroom, 1 to 2 baths, kitchen is nice and clean, the yard is maintained, the windows are washed, everything is working. I do not want to market or sully our reputation on a shitbox house, because we're not going to get the right kind of tenant in there. It's sort of like if you have a property that's a piece of garbage, you're going to get nothing but flies. I don't care
Right.
how low the rent is. So that's number one. Number two, we don't want a client to be undercapitalized, which means they're basically counting on that rent to cover their mortgage, leaving nothing left for the inevitable repairs, like with the toilet, the sink, the hot water tank, etc. So when our tenant that we put in this house calls about fixing the toilet, we want to be able to send one of our guys over that day. And I don't want to have some client balking. Now, our fees are pretty industry standard. We're not going to gouge anybody, but we need to make sure that we have carte blanche to go in there and do the repairs as needed. Now, our clients are extremely happy with this arrangement. The fees are all up front, the repair fees, and they start realizing that there is a great tenant in there. The checks get mailed to them on a regular basis. If there's a problem, they call us and we call the tenant. Now, let's get into fees of what we charge. We do not charge a monthly fee. The rent check goes directly to the client. We make our money on the initial commission when we bring in the tenant. Then we make our money on the repairs or any consulting work. If you're looking to buy another property, we have a whole array of different investment options, which we can control and show you. But we don't charge a monthly fee. Do you want to add anything to that, Lindsey?
No, I would, with that initial commission, that's basically marketing the property if you haven't already been grandfathered into our system, which I'm sure we can touch upon at some point with what it means to be on the Reilly Properties website, but marketing the property across a wide variety of platforms like Zillow and Trulia, Craigslist, HotPads, etc. Tenant finding fee, which, the marketing, and then obviously, finding the right tenant and qualifying that tenant to make sure that they are going to be the one that is going to be a good fit for the home, and writing that lease agreement. You don't have to worry about that. We take care of that. We also work with a lawyer who also looks at the leases for us too. So it's not just some lease that we're downloading from Google or putting together a 2-page lease. It's a more in-depth, very secure lease that has all those dots or those T's crossed and those I's dotted. And we also take care of both the move-in of that new tenant and the move-out of the tenant. So, and I can get into more specifics with that move-in, but the big thing to take away from that commission of, what's my money going to get you, is we take care of it all really from start to finish, from getting that tenant in to documenting everything from how that house looked to how it looks at the end, so that there's no room for question. And we have really refined our process these last few years for what that looks like. And I'm very proud of how our team takes care of, getting a tenant in and making sure that the house looks in good shape, and it's in good shape when they move out too.
Let me just add one thing to the vetting of you, the potential client. I had a conversation with a guy in Colorado the other day. He's got a property that he moved out in Cleveland Heights, and it's a part of Cleveland Heights that's getting a little sketchy. It's a 3-bedroom, and he is deciding, well, I want to rent it, and I'm looking for a property manager. Now, the first question I want to know is, why are you renting? Why are you renting? Do you have to rent because you can't afford to sell? If that's the case, that's a terrible business move, to rent because you have to cover the mortgage. I've had a number of clients where I've simply told them, you know what? You got to sell the house. Sell the house. If you got to write a check for the balance between what you owe and what it sells for, do it. Just cut your losses now. Don't let this slow bleed over the next couple years, because his house is not going to be appreciating much in the next 5 years. That's for sure. The other thing is that the number 2 question I want to know is, okay, if you are going to develop some rental income, is this the house you want to be that rental income?
Right.
A lot of times people are, well, I want to start being a landlord now, and I want to keep some property and develop some income stream. Well, the house they have is a terrible house. That's not where you want to be investing your money long term over 5 to 10 year period. You want to be in an area that's going to be appreciating.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Finally, the third thing is, well, what happens if they just can't afford to write that check because they're so far underwater? And here's where I simply tell them, walk away. Just walk away. Yeah, take the hit on the credit score, but this is not a slow bleed. This is a bigger bleed that is really hurting your long-term investment. If you have to keep propping up a money-losing deal, just take the hit, walk away, and you're going to take the hit on your credit score for a couple of years, but believe me, long-term, it's going to be worth it. And then it could just go to foreclosure, and maybe you can work something out with the bank. This is a very viable option that a lot of people don't really understand. Of course, it's done on Wall Street. Our current President Trump's done it 6 times, where he'll just tell them I'm not paying, and then he'll force them to negotiate. If you do it in Wall Street, or if you're a big money player, you're lionized as a smart businessman. So I always counsel our clients, depending on what is the nature of the deal, is to walk away.
Which I think for some landlords, that can be a hard pill to swallow when they first hear that,
Yeah,
So
yeah, it is. But that's the
that's a
nature.
hard call truth.
That's
So,
the nature of what we went through.
Yeah.
8-9 years ago. And quite frankly, the banks, if you make them sweat, they're a lot more open to what they call cash for keys. If you can be businesslike about it, that would be the smart way to go. So we want to make sure that whoever we're working for on the client side, A, knows what they're doing, and B, understands the nature of what it takes to be a landlord. And that is what we're about as property managers. We're not I wouldn't even call what we do the property manager. We're the investor planner. We're taking that house, it's an investment, and we're handling all facets of it, from the repairs to the marketing to the of course, the most important, getting the tenant, liaisoning with the city. There are fees attached for that work, but in the long run, it's money worth spending.
Right, and it's a headache that our landlords don't want to have to even think about.
Right, and
they usually don't, because they know that we're taking care of it.
Right.
You know?
And if you're on the bubble, or if you feel like over the next couple of years, I want to tee this up for a future sale, then we're going to put together a plan of what you want to put into that house over the next couple of years, that when you get to that 3-4 year time frame, this house is going to be ready to sell. Do you need to put a new roof on now, or do you have 10 years left on that roof? What about the hot water tank? What about the furnace? What about the driveway? What is the maintenance that needs to be done in this house to maintain it, so you're not stuck with major capital repairs after a 3-4 year time frame? So, all things to consider. And I want to add one more important piece of advice to you 7 listeners out there looking for a property manager. Do not go to a real estate company for property management. They want to sell a house. They are reluctant property managers at best. And the fees they pay their people to watch this house are fast food money pay. And that is the kind of service that you're going to get. They're great. There's a lot of great realtors out there. They're great for selling a house. Not good for managing a property. Any final thoughts, Lindsey?
I would definitely agree with that, and that's a story that we are happy to tell at our next podcast series. Perhaps the next, troubles of Reilly Properties.
Horror stories.
Horror stories, and yet possibly some good stories, too.
Yeah, we'll have...
We've got plenty of those as well.
Stay tuned for our Halloween podcast. We'll have tales from the property graveyard.
Tales of woe, and yet some tales of greatness.
All right. Okay, thanks, Lindsey,
right.
and thanks to our engineer, Amari. Mm-hmm. And we'll be talking later.
Thanks for listening to the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast. If you like what you heard, follow us on SoundCloud for new episodes. Our episodes coming up, as well as past episodes, will be available on other streaming platforms such as Spotify or iTunes very soon. For now, you can listen to our last episode with Mike Ferrante, real estate agent from Century 21 on SoundCloud. Like or leave a comment just to show us you're engaged. It's always appreciated. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.